enough for today, Branded.
Final Fantasy XVI is a weird game to review. I was really hyped for this entry after seeing all the praise for Final Fantasy XIV's expansions, and it gave me hope for Final Fantasy XVI to be maybe the best one in the series yet. Well, I will say this. It's a great game, but not really in the way I was expecting it to be. And I do have some negatives to talk about in today's review that you should be aware of before jumping on this wild ride. Hello guys, welcome to a new review, a new Ace Ice review here on the channel. Today we're going to review Final Fantasy XVI. I was pretty hyped for this game going into the launch of the game because I am a pretty big Final Fantasy fan. To give you some context, my favorite Final Fantasy game is 7 Remake, which I also reviewed I think a year or two ago now that it came out. I think it was in 2020. That was when we started Ace Ice, and back then I gave Final Fantasy VII Remake a 10 out of 10. I was also a fan of the original one, and I really loved that it expanded the world building. And the world building in this one is also very good. So let's quickly start with this review, shall we? Graphically, Final Fantasy XVI looks absolutely great. It's a big step up in fidelity and its presentation shows it. Great lighting, great character models and animations that fit the scope of the game, going toe to toe with other big PlayStation exclusives like God of War Ragnarok or Horizon Forbidden West, just to name a few. I will especially praise the voice acting for this one. This might be some of the best voice acting I have heard in a JRPG so far, and Final Fantasy XVI will definitely cater more to a Western audience because of that. In my 60-hour playtime, I never encountered any bug whatsoever. However, the game does suffer from some FPS drops in the performance mode, which they will probably patch out pretty soon, but nothing unplayable. The game is very stable to play, and I really didn't encounter any struggling moments whatsoever. The sound design is also great, especially the soundtrack itself, which is basically a Square Enix staple at this point. With every Final Fantasy entry or Kingdom Hearts game, you can expect a great soundtrack with it, and this one didn't disappoint. The only thing that I will nitpick on is the UI. I was never really a fan of it in the early gameplay trailers they showed, and the final game hasn't really won me over on this either. It can look a bit clunky in combat, but luckily the UI disappears when exploring the world outside of combat. Also, dear game developers, please stop using the circle menu cursor. I hate this stuff a lot. Keep it in Destiny where it belongs. I just want a normal menu selection for the future. Thank you. Otherwise, I have nothing to complain about on this. Graphics and the sound, it's all nicely polished and it looks great and actually next gen. Final Fantasy XVI opted to go full on action with this entry, and I don't mind that much, as I'm pretty familiar with other action RPG games like Kingdom Hearts as an example, and they did nail the combat system mostly. This is where you need to keep your mindset in a good position when you want to buy Final Fantasy 16, because it leans much more into Devil May Cry or God of War territory than an actual RPG game. I judge every game on its own merits, and because of it, I do really like what Final Fantasy 16 has brought to the table, but it will be controversial to the standard Final Fantasy fan. The combat system is fully action-based. Press the square button on the PlayStation controller to attack, and use the R1 button to dodge incoming enemy attacks. The game spices up the combat by throwing in icon abilities that let you use special moves depending on which icon you have equipped. If you equip Phoenix, you will be able to use fire moves, or if you equip Garuda, you will be able to use wind moves. These different types don't have any effect on your opponent though, which does remove the tactical element that a lot of previous Final Fantasy games are known for, which is my biggest gripe with the combat system as a RPG. I do love the inclusion of controlling Torgal, even though there isn't any party system like previous Final Fantasy games. You can command Torgal to attack a target or even heal yourself to a certain extent. The combat system is really fun though, especially when fighting the numerous boss fights that are absolutely thrilling and blossom in spectacle. But this is what I mean with setting the right expectations. This would have been better suited as a spin-off rather than a mainline Final Fantasy game. The gameplay pacing of Final Fantasy 16 is a strong point. You learn new icon abilities constantly throughout the whole game, so the combat will stay fresh even in the later hours. The icon battles though are absolutely great and have a lot of variety, and each encounter is unique. Think of the kaiju battles in Bayonetta 3, but then on steroids. There is also a fun hunting board system that lets you challenge multiple other boss monsters for rewards, or they are tied to a specific side quest. Speaking of side quests, some are really great and some are absolutely dull. And this is where Final Fantasy XIV's ugly MMO design pops its head into designing the game. Although Final Fantasy has never really been great about its side quests in general, there are some really good ones, but they are pretty hidden and you do need to look for them. One thing that I will absolutely praise Final Fantasy XVI for is the grinding, because there is absolutely none of it. You can fully complete the story without doing any of the side objectives or the need to grind to a specific level. If you are good in action games, you can absolutely finish this game without any grinding, and that is a rare thing in JRPGs. Another complaint I have is the exploration. It can sometimes absolutely feel useless. There isn't a single cave or unique location in this game that warrants to go off the beaten path. Even Final Fantasy VII Remake did this better, and that game is even more linear than this one. I get that a lot of people are tired of open worlds, but that doesn't excuse such poorly made exploration. This is really something I want to see improved upon in the next entry. The game also suffers from beautiful city background syndrome as well. You see that big city over there in the distance? Well, f*** you, you won't be able to explore any of it. It will only be used for a level set piece later in the game. Square Enix has done this with previous games as well, such as Kingdom Hearts 3 and even Final Fantasy VII Remake to an extent, and I wish these places would actually be explorable locations rather than set pieces for the background. Even if the game isn't open world, at least let me explore some of it. I sound very negative in this review, but the gameplay is still very decent. At the end of the day, that is the most important thing, even though I have some criticism in some areas. I do really enjoy the gameplay so far that I've been playing it. The story is absolutely Final Fantasy XVI's strongest aspect that redeems a lot of my negatives. The game has a strong world building and it's probably some of the best you will see in any Final Fantasy. Think of Game of Thrones if it actually was more fantasy than the actual TV show. The lore is expansive and multiple characters try to backstab each other for their own personal benefits. The game is also very dark themed for a normal mainline Final Fantasy game, and I really enjoyed it. A little bit a la The Witcher. You have themes like war, slavery and the meaning of brotherhood that will touch you personally. Clive is a good main protagonist, and Joshua, Sid, Gav and Byron are great side characters. I really enjoyed them. I wasn't the biggest fan though of Jill. She is mostly a sidekick for Clive and she doesn't really show much emotion most of the time compared to the other legendary female characters in other Final Fantasy games like Tifa or Aerith as an example. And of course, everyone loves Torgal, the best boy in the whole game. The villain was okay, but not anywhere close to Sephiroth or even Ardyn from Final Fantasy XV. I do wish the villain was a bit better in this one. One other thing I really want to praise is the active time lore feature in the game that shows you all the most important information on characters and locations in a certain cutscene or gameplay moment. You might easily forget about a certain plot element, and this is really a feature I want to see return in other future games and other franchises that really need to take a look at this. In a nutshell, the story and world building in Final Fantasy XVI are its strongest aspects and have some of the most enjoyable moments in the game. Despite my criticisms towards Final Fantasy XVI, I do believe at the end of the day that this game wins me over, with a great story, boss battles, combat system and great soundtrack that are the worth of the price of admission of the game alone. However, you have to go in with a certain mindset that this isn't your standard Final Fantasy. You should expect heavy influences from Devil May Cry and God of War. If you do so, I do believe you will be amazingly surprised. At the same time, I do hope this more action focus over RPG elements stays with Final Fantasy XVI alone, as I do want the inevitable Final Fantasy XVII to be more in line with Final Fantasy VII Remake's approach. That doesn't mean though you should skip out on this game. It's a wild ride you don't want to miss out on, and I'm happy that it exists in my game library. The final score for Final Fantasy XVI will be a 9 out of 10 with a skill score to 8.5. Now, did you guys like this review, this Ace Ice review? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you have already played Final Fantasy XVI, do you guys agree with my opinions of the game? Thank you guys for watching as always. Let me know in the comment section down below what do you guys think of this review. The next review will probably be Starfield, because that's already coming out in September, but I'm actually not sure of that, if something will be in between. There are some really cool indie games in between in the summer, like Sea of Stars. Maybe I can review that. So I need to see which game is going to get reviewed first. I need to see that still. Thank you guys for watching. As always, like this video if you like it. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more game reviews or just discussions in general. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.